The sound of a hard kick echoed across West Chapel Avenue, turning heads on both sides of the street. A polished silver Aston Martin trembled beneath the impact. The afternoon air felt heavy, and the quiet town seemed to hold its breath. Outside a diner and a neighborhood barbershop, several adults paused their conversations and stared toward the scene unfolding at the curb. Behind the wheel sat Maya Williams, a dignified African-American woman in her early 60s. Her posture remained calm, even as uncertainty tightened inside her chest. She lowered her window halfway and looked at the officer standing beside her vehicle. His expression carried judgment before a single question had been asked. Officer Caleb Harlan leaned closer and spoke with open hostility. Maya immediately sensed that this was not a routine traffic stop. She politely asked whether she had broken any law. Instead of explaining a violation, Caleb questioned her very presence. His words carried assumptions that struck deeper than any accusation. Maya tried to remain composed. She informed him that the car belonged to her and offered her license, registration, and insurance. The officer glanced at the documents, but seemed uninterested in the facts. The legal paperwork did nothing to soften his attitude. Maya calmly reminded him that she was a citizen with rights. That simple statement appeared to anger him even more. Before she could say another word, Caleb suddenly grabbed the door handle and yanked the Aston Martin's door open with alarming force. The door swung toward Maya so quickly that she recoiled against her seat. Her heart jumped. She asked him to be careful, explaining that he had nearly struck her. Caleb ignored the concern entirely. Without permission, he leaned into the vehicle and announced that he was shutting off the engine himself. Maya raised one hand slowly, trying to avoid any misunderstanding. She offered to turn the vehicle off herself. What happened next stunned her. Caleb shoved her hand aside. His metal watch scraped across the back of her skin, leaving a painful cut. Maya stared at the thin line of blood forming on her hand. For a moment, she could hardly believe what had happened. When she pointed out the injury, Caleb dismissed it immediately and blamed her instead. Across the street, the witnesses remained silent. Some watched from the diner windows. Others stood near the barbershop entrance. Their faces reflected discomfort and concern. Nobody interrupted. In towns like Fairmont, people often understood the risks of involving themselves in confrontations with authority. Maya looked directly at the body camera attached to Caleb's uniform. She carefully stated that she had not threatened him, resisted him, or consented to him reaching into her vehicle. The officer switched off the engine, and the soft hum of the luxury car faded into silence. The atmosphere became tense enough to feel physical. After demanding her documents, Caleb examined them. Everything was valid. The registration clearly showed that the Aston Martin legally belonged to Maya. Yet the discovery seemed only to deepen his suspicion. He questioned how she had obtained the vehicle. Maya calmly explained that the question had no legal relevance. She reminded him that she had obeyed every traffic law. Instead of acknowledging her answer, Caleb claimed she appeared nervous. Maya looked at her injured hand and then at the officer standing over her. She explained that anyone would be nervous after having a car door violently opened, being physically shoved, and being judged before speaking. For a brief moment, Caleb appeared unable to respond. Then his pride took control. He ordered Maya out of the vehicle and announced that she was being investigated for possible smuggling. The accusation seemed to appear from nowhere. Maya stepped out slowly, keeping her hands visible. She clearly stated that she did not consent to any search of herself or her vehicle. Her voice trembled, but her words remained precise. Without presenting evidence, Caleb moved behind her and snapped handcuffs around her wrists. The metal tightened painfully. Maya pleaded with him. She reminded him that she was 62 years old, standing still and offering no resistance. Her requests were ignored. As the cuffs bit into her skin, fear mixed with something colder. It was the realization that the situation had never been about a traffic stop. It had become something far more dangerous. Standing beside her own vehicle with blood drying on her hand, Maya watched Officer Harlan begin searching the Aston Martin. She repeated that she did not consent. The officer searched anyway. Nothing appeared suspicious. Nothing justified his actions. Then his body blocked the view. Maya felt a sudden chill move through her stomach. Something about the way he reached toward his equipment made her heart pound harder. She called out to him, demanding to know what he was doing. A moment later, he emerged holding a small plastic packet. Maya stared in disbelief. The accusation she feared was already forming on his lips. And deep inside, she realized that this stop was never about finding evidence. It was about creating it. Maya Williams stood beside the Aston Martin with her wrists locked behind her back. The metal cuffs dug into her skin with every movement. Blood from the scratch on her hand had begun to dry, leaving a dark mark against her brown skin. The afternoon heat lingered over West Chapel Avenue, but a colder feeling settled inside her. Officer Caleb Harlan held the small plastic packet between two gloved fingers. He raised it toward his body camera and announced that possible narcotics had been discovered inside the vehicle. His voice carried confidence. Maya heard something else beneath it. She heard preparation. She heard a story already being written. Her heart pounded, but she forced herself to remain still. She knew panic would only help him. Looking directly at the body camera, she firmly denied ownership of the packet. She demanded that every available recording be reviewed. Street cameras, body cameras, and witness accounts would all prove the truth. Caleb stepped closer and lowered his voice. The change in tone unsettled Maya more than the accusation itself. He spoke as if the outcome had already been decided. His words carried the confidence of someone who believed the system would support him. Maya suddenly understood that this stop was no longer about a traffic violation. It was about power. Across the street, adults continued watching from the diner and barber shop. Some shook their heads quietly. Others exchanged uneasy looks. Nobody interfered. The silence carried years of experience. Many of them seemed familiar with scenes like this. They understood how quickly involvement could become a target. Caleb demanded access to the trunk. Maya informed him that it contained private documents and that he had no legal right to inspect them. Her objection made no difference. He opened it anyway. Inside sat a brown leather briefcase beside a neatly folded grey coat. The briefcase appeared ordinary. Caleb treated it like evidence. Maya watched him reach for it with growing concern. Fear remained inside her, but something stronger was beginning to emerge. Determination. She knew exactly what rested inside that case. The officer flipped open the briefcase and began examining the contents. At first, his movements were careless, then they slowed. Maya noticed a subtle change in his expression. His confidence flickered. The shift was brief, but impossible to miss. For the first time since the stop began, Officer Harlan looked uncertain. Maya recognized the moment immediately. He had found something unexpected. The street seemed quieter as Caleb stared at one particular document. His eyes moved across the page several times. Maya could not see the contents from where she stood, but she already knew what he was reading. The papers identified her. Not as a suspect, not as a criminal, not as a smuggler. They identified her as the incoming chief of police for Fairmont. Maya watched his face carefully. A decent officer would have stopped everything immediately. A decent officer would have removed the cuffs, apologized, and corrected the mistake. Caleb did none of those things. Instead, she saw calculation. His eyes shifted, his jaw tightened. The look reminded Maya of countless internal investigations she had witnessed throughout her career. It was the expression of someone searching for a way out. Finally, she broke the silence. "You see it now," she said quietly. Caleb looked up. "See what?" Maya met his gaze without blinking. "You did not stop a criminal," she replied. "You stopped your new chief." The words hung in the air. For a brief moment, nobody moved. Even the witnesses across the street seemed frozen. Caleb stared at her. Shock flashed across his face. Yet instead of accepting reality, he doubled down. He began searching through additional folders inside the briefcase. One carried federal markings. Another contained asset records connected to the Aston Martin. The more he read, the more desperate he appeared. Then he found a new angle. The vehicle's previous owner had once been linked to a federal money laundering investigation. The information was real, but it had nothing to do with Maya. The Aston Martin had been legally assigned and thoroughly documented. That distinction did not matter to Caleb. Suddenly, he began speaking louder, making sure his body camera recorded every word. He suggested that Maya needed to explain why she was driving a vehicle connected to organized crime. The accusation felt manufactured. Maya knew exactly why. His original story had collapsed. Now he needed another. She calmly pointed out that he had not known any of this information before the stop. He had discovered it only after opening documents he never had the right to access. Caleb ignored the logic. He continued building his narrative. The atmosphere grew heavier. The witnesses remained. The cuffs still hurt. The scratch on her hand still burned. Yet Maya noticed something important. Caleb was no longer acting like a confident officer. He was acting like a frightened man. Then he reached for his radio. Maya's attention sharpened instantly. She knew exactly who he intended to call. The officer pressed the button and requested immediate contact with Captain Gerald Whitmore. The name struck Maya like a warning bell because she already knew that name. And if Captain Whitmore became involved, the problem standing beside the Aston Martin might be far bigger than one reckless traffic stop. Seconds later, the radio crackled to life. A voice answered. The conversation that followed would expose far more than Caleb Harlan ever intended. The radio crackled with static before a familiar voice answered. Captain Gerald Whitmore sounded annoyed at first, as though he expected nothing more than another routine interruption. Maya Williams stood beside the Aston Martin, her wrists aching inside the handcuffs, listening carefully. Officer Caleb Harlan lowered his voice slightly, but not enough. "Captain, I've got the Aston Martin. The Williams woman is driving it." The response did not come immediately. A brief silence followed. Then Whitmore spoke again. "Repeat that name." Maya noticed the change instantly. The irritation had vanished. Something colder had replaced it. Caleb repeated her name, Maya Williams. Another silence followed. This one lasted longer. The witnesses across the street remained motionless. The distant sounds of traffic seemed to fade beneath the weight of the conversation. Even the wind moving through the trees felt quieter. Finally, Whitmore responded, "Do not let that vehicle leave." The order came quickly, too quickly. Maya's eyes narrowed. At that point, Whitmore had not reviewed the stop. He had not spoken to her. He had not examined the alleged evidence. Yet his first instinct was to seize control of the vehicle. That told Maya everything she needed to know. Caleb swallowed. "Yes, sir," Whitmore continued. "Write it as a suspected laundering connection through Fairmont evidence records. Secure the vehicle. Move it to the asset lot." Maya felt her pulse quicken. There it was. Not a discovery, not an investigation. A script, a justification being created after the fact. She turned slightly toward Caleb's body camera and spoke clearly. "Let the record show that Captain Whitmore just instructed Officer Harlan to create a money laundering justification after the stop had already occurred." Caleb spun toward her. "Be quiet." But the damage was already done. Whitmore's voice suddenly returned through the radio. "Who is that?" Maya answered before Caleb could stop her. "This is Maya Elaine Williams." Silence exploded across the line. No static, no response. Nothing. Maya stood straighter despite the cuffs. "And tomorrow morning," she continued, "I am scheduled to assume command of your department." The silence that followed felt endless. Across the street, several witnesses exchanged stunned looks. One man slowly lowered his coffee cup. An older woman near the bus stop covered her mouth. Even Caleb appeared shaken. The truth had finally entered the conversation. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then Whitmore returned. His voice sounded different now. Controlled, careful, dangerous. "Harlan," he said, "maintain control of the scene." The radio disconnected. Maya stared at Caleb. "That is exactly what you have lost," she said quietly. The officer's face had become noticeably paler. His confidence was fading. Yet Maya could see something else replacing it. Desperation. That frightened her more than his anger ever had. Desperate people often made reckless decisions. Caleb slammed the radio back onto his belt. "You don't understand what you've stepped into," he muttered. Maya held his gaze. "I understand perfectly." The answer irritated him. He closed the briefcase aggressively and stared toward the street. The witnesses remained as too many eyes, too many ears. Too many people had heard too much. For years Maya had worked in law enforcement. She knew how misconduct survived. It survived through secrecy, through silence, through missing records and incomplete reports. But this stop had unfolded in front of an audience. That changed everything. Fairmont looked peaceful from the outside. Brick storefronts lined Main Street. Magnolia trees shaded sidewalks. Church bells drifted across neighborhoods every Sunday morning. Yet beneath that pleasant image, Maya had already discovered troubling patterns. Before accepting the chief's position, she had reviewed complaint files, dozens of them. Drivers stopped without cause, questions about ownership after valid documents were presented, searches performed after consent was denied, complaints dismissed without meaningful review, and one name kept appearing: Captain Gerald Whitmore. Now she was standing beside a luxury car, handcuffed after an unlawful stop, listening to that same captain create explanations through a radio transmission. The coincidence was impossible to ignore. Caleb stepped closer. "You're making this bigger than it needs to be." Maya almost laughed, not because the situation was funny, because the statement revealed how deeply he misunderstood what had already happened. "You made it bigger when you planted evidence," she replied. His jaw tightened. "You can't prove that." Maya glanced toward the body camera. "Maybe I can." For the first time, Caleb looked at his own camera with visible discomfort. The device that had always protected him suddenly seemed less friendly. Then something unexpected happened. A patrol car turned onto West Chapel Avenue. Its lights were off. Its approach was slow. Maya watched carefully as the vehicle rolled toward the scene. The driver's door opened. A woman stepped out. Sergeant Elena Brooks. Her arrival seemed ordinary, but the moment Maya saw her expression, she sensed something important. Brooks was not arriving to protect a story. She was arriving to ask questions. And questions were exactly what Caleb Harlan could no longer afford. Sergeant Eleanor Brooks stepped from her patrol car and immediately surveyed the scene. Years of experience allowed her to absorb details quickly. Maya Williams stood beside the Aston Martin with handcuffs around her wrists. Blood marked the back of her hand. Officer Caleb Harlan stood near the open trunk, visibly tense. Several adults watched from across the street. Nothing about the scene looked routine. Brooks approached calmly. "Officer Harlan, report." Caleb answered too quickly. "Traffic stop, possible smuggling indicators, vehicle connected to laundering records, possible narcotics recovered." The explanation sounded rehearsed. Brooks listened without interruption. Then she turned toward Maya. "Ma'am," Maya spoke clearly, "I was stopped without a stated traffic violation. Officer Harlan opened my door, injured my hand, searched my vehicle without consent, handcuffed me, and produced a packet that does not belong to me." Brooks looked from Maya to Caleb. "Was your body camera active during the entire encounter?" A tiny hesitation appeared, barely noticeable, but Brooks noticed it. "Yes," Caleb answered. The sergeant nodded. "Good. Then we'll preserve the footage." Maya saw Caleb's shoulders stiffen. The response was not what he expected. Brooks continued. "What was the legal basis for the stop?" "Possible laundering indicators," Caleb replied. "Before or after the search?" The question landed like a hammer. For a moment, Caleb said nothing. The witnesses across the street remained silent, but their attention sharpened. Brooks waited. "The vehicle was suspicious," Caleb finally answered. "The vehicle," Brooks asked, "or the driver?" The street seemed to freeze. Maya noticed several witnesses exchange looks. One man outside the barber shop slowly folded his arms. An older woman near the bus stop stared directly at Caleb. The question had reached everyone. "That's not fair," Caleb muttered. Brooks remained calm. "Neither is creating probable cause after the stop and pretending it existed beforehand." Maya felt something shift in the atmosphere. Not safety, not victory, but the first crack in Caleb's control. Brooks stepped closer and noticed the scratch on Maya's hand. "Do you require medical attention?" "The injury is minor," Maya replied. "What I need is for these cuffs to come off." Brooks looked directly at Caleb. "Why is she restrained?" "Officer safety." The answer sounded weak. Even Caleb seemed unconvinced by it. Brooks glanced at Maya, a 62-year-old woman. Unarmed, standing still, surrounded by witnesses, she looked back at Caleb. "Remove the handcuffs." The officer did not move. Brooks's voice hardened. That was not a suggestion. Reluctantly, Caleb stepped forward and unlocked the restraints. Maya brought her hands forward slowly. Blood returned painfully to her wrists. Deep red marks remained where the metal had pressed into her skin. Brooks noticed every detail. She said nothing, yet Maya could tell she was documenting everything mentally. A good investigator did not rush. Then Brooks glanced into the open briefcase. Her eyes stopped. Just for a second. Maya recognized the moment. The sergeant had seen the appointment papers. She now knew exactly who Maya was. Their eyes met. Maya gave the smallest shake of her head. Not yet. Brooks understood immediately. She returned her attention to Caleb. This scene is frozen. The words carried authority. Nobody moves the vehicle. Nobody touches the briefcase. All body camera footage, dispatch logs, and radio communications will be preserved. Caleb stared at her. Captain Whitmore ordered the vehicle secured. I heard what you said, Brooks replied. I'm giving a lawful order now. The tension thickened. Caleb looked trapped between obedience and panic. Maya rubbed her sore wrists while watching the exchange. For years, Fairmont had hidden problems behind paperwork and official language. Complaints disappeared, investigations stalled. Citizens were told there was insufficient evidence, yet here on West Chapel Avenue, evidence was accumulating faster than anyone could bury it. Caleb tried another approach. He lowered his voice. Sergeant, you're making a mistake. Brooks remained unmoved. Possibly. That's why I'm preserving everything. The answer frustrated him. Facts were becoming difficult to avoid. Then Brooks noticed something else. A document partially visible inside the briefcase. The city seal, the appointment schedule, the official heading. Incoming Chief of Police, Maya Elaine Williams. This time Brooks could not pretend she had not seen it. Her expression remained professional, but her tone shifted subtly. Respect, not because of Maya's title, because of what the title meant. Someone had handcuffed the incoming chief after an unlawful stop. The consequences suddenly became much larger. Brooks turned toward Caleb. Officer Harlan, step away from the vehicle. Sergeant, now. He obeyed. Barely. Across the street, clouds drifted across the afternoon sky. Shadows stretched longer over the pavement. The town appeared peaceful on the surface. Yet beneath that calm exterior, something significant had begun. Maya could feel it. Years of buried complaints. Years of ignored warnings, years of carefully protected misconduct. All of it seemed to be rising toward the surface. Brooks took out her notebook. We're documenting everything from the beginning. Maya nodded. For the first time since the stop began, she felt a small measure of hope. Then Brooks asked a question that made Caleb visibly pale. Officer Harlan, she said quietly, before activating your lights, what specific traffic law did Mrs. Williams violate? The silence that followed lasted far too long. The silence after Sergeant Elena Brooks asked her question felt endless. West Chapel Avenue seemed to hold its breath. Officer Caleb Harlan stood beside his patrol car, searching for an answer that did not exist. Before activating your lights, Brooks repeated calmly. What traffic violation occurred? Caleb shifted his weight. The vehicle drew my attention. Brooks kept her eyes on him. That is not a traffic violation. The witnesses across the street remained silent, but Maya Williams could feel the mood changing. People who had spent years watching similar encounters suddenly saw something unusual. An officer being required to answer, Caleb glanced toward the Aston Martin. It was a high-value vehicle traveling through an area known for criminal activity. Brooks wrote something in her notebook. Was the registration expired? No. Was the driver speeding? No. Failure to signal? No. Equipment violation? No. Each answer seemed to shrink him slightly. Maya watched carefully. The truth was forcing itself into daylight. Brooks finally lowered her notebook. Then there was no traffic violation before the stop. Caleb opened his mouth. Nothing came out. For the first time since the encounter began, the officer looked uncertain about his next move. The radio on his shoulder suddenly crackled. Dispatch. The voice requested an update. Caleb reached for the microphone. Before he could speak, Brooks stepped forward. I'll handle it. She took the transmission herself. Scene remains active. All evidence preservation procedures are in effect. Additional documentation is being completed. The wording was deliberate, professional, neutral, and completely outside Caleb's control. Maya noticed the frustration on his face. For years, he had probably relied on quick explanations and incomplete reports. Now another officer was creating an independent record. That changed everything. The afternoon sun had begun sinking lower behind the buildings. Long shadows stretched across the pavement. The witnesses still remained. More importantly, none of them seemed eager to leave. One older man stepped forward from the barbershop doorway. "Sergeant," he called. Brooks looked over. "Yes, sir." "I watched most of it." The statement hit Caleb like a punch. The man continued. "She kept asking why she'd been stopped. He never answered." Another voice joined, an older woman from the bus stop. "I heard that too." Then a third witness spoke, and she asked him not to search the car more than once. The silence that followed carried a different feeling now, no longer fear, confirmation. Brooks calmly recorded their names. Caleb stared at the ground. The street was becoming a witness. Maya felt a mixture of exhaustion and determination. Her wrists still hurt, her hand still burned. Yet she knew something important had happened. The narrative was slipping away from the officer who had created it. Then Caleb's phone vibrated. He checked the screen. Captain Whitmore. His expression tightened. "I need to take this," he said. Brooks nodded. "You can take it. You're still staying here." Caleb walked several steps away and answered. Even from a distance, Maya could tell the conversation was tense. Whitmore was talking. Caleb was listening. Then Caleb started talking quickly, defensively. His shoulders became rigid. At one point he looked toward Brooks, then toward Maya, then toward the witnesses. When the call ended, his face appeared noticeably paler. Brooks noticed it too. "Problem?" she asked. "No." The answer arrived too fast. She wrote another note. Maya almost smiled. Not because the situation was amusing, because honesty and dishonesty often revealed themselves through tiny details. A rushed answer, an avoided question, an unnecessary explanation. Years of investigations had taught her that. Then Brooks asked another question, one Caleb clearly had not expected. "Where is the alleged narcotics packet now?" The officer patted his vest pocket. "Secured." Brooks looked directly at him. "In your pocket?" "Temporarily." The sergeant's expression changed. "Was it photographed before removal?" No answer. "Was it collected in an evidence bag?" Still no answer. "Was chain of custody established?" Nothing. The witnesses exchanged looks. Maya felt her heartbeat quicken. The questions were simple. The silence was devastating. Brooks took a slow breath. "Officer Harlan, place the packet on the hood of your patrol vehicle. It will remain there until evidence technicians arrive." Caleb looked offended. "You're treating me like a suspect." "I'm treating evidence like evidence." The response landed hard. Reluctantly, he removed the packet and placed it on the hood. Brooks immediately photographed its location. Then she requested evidence technicians. The atmosphere shifted again. This was no longer a traffic stop. It was becoming an investigation. Maya looked toward the Aston Martin. The silver vehicle reflected the fading sunlight. To most people, it was simply a luxury car. To Caleb, it had become a threat. To Whitmore, apparently something even worse. And to Maya, it represented something deeply personal. Because hidden within its documented history was the unfinished work of her late husband, Leon Williams, a man who had spent years quietly following trails that others ignored, a man who believed truth eventually surfaced, no matter how deeply it was buried. As evidence technicians pulled onto West Chapel Avenue and stepped from their vehicle, Maya realized the situation had crossed a line. Nothing that happened next could be erased with paperwork alone. Then Brooks asked a final question. A question that caused genuine fear to appear in Caleb Harlan's eyes. "Officer," she said quietly, "exactly when did Captain Whitmore first learn Maya Williams was driving that Aston Martin?" The question hung in the air like a storm cloud. Officer Caleb Harlan did not answer immediately. Sergeant Elena Brooks watched him carefully. "When did Captain Whitmore first learn Maya Williams was driving the Aston Martin?" she repeated. The evidence technicians had already begun photographing the packet on the patrol car hood. Cameras clicked steadily. Every image added another layer to the official record. Caleb swallowed. "When I called him." Brooks nodded. "And before that call, did he know Maya Williams was involved?" "No." "Did he know who owned the vehicle?" No. Did he review any evidence before ordering the vehicle held? Silence. The answer was obvious. Brooks wrote another note. Across the street, several witnesses exchanged looks. The pattern was becoming visible even to people with no law enforcement experience. A stop without a violation. A search without consent. A packet without documentation. An order without evidence. Each piece made the next one harder to explain. Caleb looked toward Maya. For the first time, his anger seemed smaller than his worry. Maya recognized the change. The officer was beginning to understand that the situation had moved beyond his control. The sergeant stepped toward the Aston Martin. "Mrs. Williams," she said, "there is something I need to ask directly." "Go ahead." "Why did Captain Whitmore react so strongly to your name?" The question carried weight. Maya glanced at the open briefcase. Then she looked back at Brooks. "Because he recognized it." "From where?" Maya hesitated, not because she feared the answer, because speaking it aloud would change everything. The late afternoon breeze moved through the street. A church bell sounded somewhere in the distance. Finally she spoke. "My husband." Brooks waited. "Leon Williams." The name produced an immediate reaction. Not from Brooks, from Caleb. His eyes widened. Only for a second. But Maya saw it. The reaction confirmed something she had suspected. The name meant something inside the department. "You know who he was," Maya said quietly. Caleb looked away. Brooks noticed. "Should I?" the sergeant asked. Maya nodded. Leon Williams worked with federal investigators. The street seemed to become quieter. Even the witnesses appeared more attentive. Brooks folded her arms. "In what capacity?" "Officially, he reviewed financial records connected to seized assets. Unofficially, he helped track money that never should have disappeared." The words landed heavily. Caleb immediately interrupted. "That's speculation." "No," Maya replied. "That is documented history." Brooks looked between them. "Money connected to what?" Maya took a slow breath. "Asset seizures, missing property, laundering investigations, cases that were supposed to be closed but never really ended." The evidence technicians continued working. Neither seemed interested in the conversation, yet Maya knew everything was being recorded. That mattered. She continued. "Leon believed money continued moving through Fairmont long after the original investigations disappeared from public attention." Brooks's expression hardened. "And he documented it? For years?" Caleb laughed suddenly. The sound felt forced. "Convenient story." Maya looked directly at him. "You reacted when I said his name." The officer said nothing. That silence spoke loudly. Brooks noticed it too. The sergeant opened her notebook again. "Officer Harlan, have you ever heard the name Leon Williams before today?" Another pause. "A dangerous one." "Maybe. Maybe. I don't remember." The answer sounded weak. Brooks wrote it down anyway. The sun was sinking lower now. Golden light reflected across the Aston Martin's silver paint. Maya suddenly thought about Leon. He had never been dramatic, never loud, never interested in attention. He believed truth won slowly, patiently, through records, through facts, through details that dishonest people overlooked. Many people mistook patience for weakness. That mistake usually benefited Leon. Maya looked toward the briefcase again. Inside were years of work, years of notes, years of evidence, and years of unanswered questions. Questions that apparently made Captain Whitmore nervous. The evidence technicians approached Brooks. One handed her a form. "Documentation complete." She reviewed it quickly, then nodded. "Thank you." As they walked away, another patrol vehicle arrived. This one carried no lights, no sirens, no urgency. Yet Maya immediately felt the atmosphere change. The driver remained inside for several seconds, watching, waiting. Then the door opened. A middle-aged officer stepped out. Maya had never met him before, but Caleb clearly recognized him. The officer approached slowly. His eyes moved from the packet to the Aston Martin, then to Maya, then to Brooks. Finally he spoke. "Captain Whitmore wants an immediate update." Brooks remained calm. "He'll get one through official channels." The man hesitated. "He's requesting the vehicle be transported tonight." Maya saw genuine alarm flash across Brooks' face for the first time. Only briefly, but it was there. The sergeant looked toward the Aston Martin, then toward the briefcase, then toward Caleb. Slowly, she shook her head. No. The officer blinked. No. The vehicle is not moving. The newcomer looked uncomfortable. That order came directly from the captain. Brooks's voice became noticeably firmer. Then the captain can explain it himself. A silence followed. The man glanced toward Caleb. Neither spoke. Then he quietly returned to his patrol vehicle. As he drove away, Maya felt a chill run through her, because she finally understood something important. Captain Whitmore was no longer trying to manage a traffic stop. He was trying to get control of the Aston Martin. And if he wanted that vehicle badly enough to send officers across town after hearing Maya's name, then whatever Leon Williams had uncovered was far more dangerous than Maya had imagined. The realization settled heavily inside Maya Williams. Captain Gerald Whitmore was not protecting a traffic stop. He was protecting something connected to the Aston Martin. That fact changed everything. The sun hung low above Fairmont, casting long golden shadows across West Chapel Avenue. The witnesses remained nearby. Some pretended to check their phones. Others stood quietly outside the diner and barber shop. Nobody wanted to leave before seeing how the situation ended. Sergeant Eleanor Brooks closed her notebook and looked directly at Maya. "Chief Williams, do you need medical treatment now?" Maya glanced at the scratch across her hand. "Not yet. You should document the injury." "I intend to," Brooks nodded. The exchange seemed ordinary, yet Caleb Harlan appeared irritated by it. Everything was being documented. Everything was becoming part of the record. For years, paperwork had protected people like him. Now paperwork threatened them. The irony was impossible to miss. A cool breeze swept through the street. Maya rubbed her sore wrists and looked toward the Aston Martin. The silver vehicle reflected the fading afternoon light. To everyone else, it appeared to be an expensive car. To her, it represented something far more important. It carried part of Leon Williams's unfinished work. The thought brought a familiar ache. Leon had never wanted recognition. He believed most meaningful victories happened quietly. One fact discovered, one record preserved, one lie exposed. Over time, those pieces became impossible to ignore. Maya often wondered whether he knew how dangerous his work had become. Perhaps he had. Perhaps that was why he had left so many safeguards behind. Brooks suddenly broke the silence. "Tell me about the vehicle." Maya looked at her. "What exactly do you want to know?" "Why is Whitmore so desperate to control it?" The question lingered. Maya considered her answer carefully, then she spoke. "Because the car remembers." Caleb laughed sharply. "Cars don't remember." Maya ignored him. "This one does." Brooks remained silent, listening. Maya continued. "Years ago, federal investigators used this vehicle during an asset seizure case. Tracking systems were installed. Data collection systems were installed. Certain functions remained active longer than most people realized." The sergeant's eyes narrowed. "Are you saying the vehicle recorded today's stop?" Maya did not answer directly. She simply looked at the Aston Martin. That was answer enough. For the first time since the encounter began, genuine fear appeared in Caleb Harlan's eyes. Not anxiety, not concern, fear. "That's impossible," he said. "Is it?" Maya replied. The officer had no response. Brooks noticed the change immediately. She watched him carefully. Years of experience taught her when someone knew more than they wanted to admit. Caleb suddenly looked toward the briefcase, then toward the vehicle, then toward the witnesses. His mind was racing. Maya could almost see it happening. He was calculating, trying to estimate how much damage had already been done, trying to determine what evidence existed beyond his reach, trying to figure out whether Captain Whitmore knew the same thing. The answers clearly frightened him. The sergeant stepped closer. "Officer Harlan." He looked up. "If the vehicle contains independent recording systems, did you know that before today?" The question hit hard. Too hard. Caleb answered immediately. "No." The speed of the response drew Brooks's attention. "Interesting," she said. He frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" People usually think before answering important questions. The comment stung. Maya saw it. The officer looked away. Across the street, another witness quietly approached Brooks. A grey-haired barber, he removed a folded piece of paper from his pocket. "Sergeant," he said softly. Brooks accepted it. "What is this?" "My business card." She looked confused. The barber continued, "My security cameras face the street." Silence, complete silence. Even the distant traffic seemed to disappear. Maya felt her pulse quicken. The barber pointed toward his shop. "The cameras record 24 hours a day." Brooks stared at him. "How much of this stop did they capture?" The man shrugged. "Probably all of it." The answer struck like lightning. Caleb's face lost color. Maya almost couldn't believe her luck. An independent camera, a fixed angle, a recording beyond departmental control. The implications were enormous. Brooks immediately requested preservation of the footage. The barber agreed without hesitation. Meanwhile, Caleb looked physically ill. Maya noticed his breathing had changed, shallower, faster, more nervous. Exactly the way he had described her earlier. The irony was impossible to ignore. Then his phone vibrated again. Whitmore. This time, Caleb hesitated before answering. That hesitation revealed everything. He already knew the conversation would be bad. Slowly, he accepted the call and stepped away. Maya watched him carefully. The captain was speaking. A lot. Caleb barely managed a few words. Then suddenly, he froze. His eyes widened. He looked directly at the Aston Martin, then at Maya, then at Brooks. When the call ended, he stood motionless. The witnesses noticed. Brooks noticed. Maya noticed. The officer looked like a man who had just received terrible news. Finally, Brooks asked the obvious question. "What did the captain say?" Caleb swallowed hard. For several seconds, he seemed unable to speak. Then he quietly answered. "Captain Whitmore is on his way here himself." The street fell silent, because everyone understood what that meant. Whatever was hidden inside Fairmont's past was no longer staying hidden, and now the man at the center of it was coming personally to West Chapel Avenue. A strange silence settled over West Chapel Avenue after Caleb Harlan announced that Captain Gerald Whitmore was coming personally. Nobody spoke. The witnesses remained where they were. The evidence technicians continued working. Sergeant Elena Brooks stood beside the Aston Martin with her notebook in hand. Maya Williams felt the air grow heavier. Because people like Whitmore rarely appeared at scenes unless something important was at risk. And today something clearly was. Caleb paced near his patrol car. The confidence he had displayed at the beginning of the stop was gone. Every few seconds, he looked down the street, waiting, watching, worrying. Maya noticed it all. Years in law enforcement had taught her how fear revealed itself. Sometimes it appeared as anger, sometimes it appeared as arrogance, and sometimes it appeared as silence. Caleb was becoming very quiet. Several minutes passed. The sun drifted lower. Orange light reflected from storefront windows and stretched across the pavement. Then a black sedan appeared at the far end of the avenue. Nobody needed an introduction. The vehicle slowed, parked, and Captain Gerald Whitmore stepped out. He wore a grey suit instead of a uniform. Everything about his appearance suggested control. Control of the department, control of the narrative, control of the outcome. But Maya noticed something beneath the polished exterior. Tension. The captain's eyes immediately found the Aston Martin. Not Maya, not Caleb, the car. That detail told her everything. Whitmore approached with measured steps. His expression remained calm, yet his attention never drifted far from the vehicle. "Chief Williams," he said. The title sounded forced. Maya nodded. "Captain Whitmore." Neither smiled. Brooks stood nearby, watching, recording. Whitmore turned toward Caleb. "Officer Harlan?" "Captain." The exchange was brief, professional. Yet Maya sensed an entire conversation hiding underneath it. Whitmore looked toward the packet on the patrol car hood, then toward the evidence technicians. His jaw tightened. "Why are they here?" Brooks answered before Caleb could. "Evidence preservation." The captain's eyes shifted toward her. "For a routine stop." "This stopped being routine a long time ago," Brooks replied. The answer landed hard. Several witnesses nodded quietly. Whitmore noticed. For the first time, he seemed aware of the audience surrounding him. Adults from the diner, Adults from the barber shop, residents waiting at the bus stop, everyone watching, everyone listening. The captain forced a smile. I believe there has been a misunderstanding. Maya almost laughed. The phrase sounded familiar. She had read it dozens of times inside closed complaint files. Misunderstanding, miscommunication, procedural issue. Different words, same outcome. The truth buried beneath paperwork. Really? Maya asked. Whitmore nodded. Officer Harlan was acting in good faith. Brooks immediately wrote something in her notebook. The captain noticed. Sergeant? Just documenting statements. The answer irritated him. Maya saw it. Whitmore liked controlling records, not being included in them. The captain turned toward the Aston Martin. Chief Williams, perhaps we should discuss this privately. Why? To avoid unnecessary attention. Maya looked around. The witnesses, the technicians, the officers, the cameras. Then she looked back at Whitmore. The attention already exists. His smile disappeared, only for a second. But Maya saw it, so did Brooks. The captain shifted tactics. The vehicle has a complicated history. I know. Federal asset records are sensitive. I know that too. Whitmore stared at her. The conversation was not going where he wanted. Finally, he lowered his voice. Leon Williams should have left some things alone. The words hit like a thunderclap. Maya felt her heartbeat stop for an instant. Brooks looked up sharply. Even Caleb appeared stunned. The captain seemed to realize his mistake immediately. But it was already too late. The name had been spoken, not by Maya, not by Brooks, by him. Whitmore quickly recovered. I mean the investigations. Nobody responded, because everyone understood what had just happened. The captain had revealed familiarity that should not have existed. Brooks calmly wrote another note. The scratching sound of her pen seemed unusually loud. Whitmore watched her. Sergeant, are you documenting every word I say? Yes, sir. The answer was immediate. The captain looked away. For the first time since arriving, he appeared genuinely uncomfortable. Maya noticed something else. The witnesses were no longer merely observing. They were remembering. Remembering complaints, remembering stops, remembering questions that had never been answered. The atmosphere had changed. People were beginning to connect dots. Whitmore sensed it too. He glanced toward the Aston Martin again, then toward the briefcase, then toward Caleb. His expression darkened. A silent message passed between them. Maya recognized it immediately. Damage control. The captain stepped closer. Chief Williams, I strongly recommend we relocate this discussion. Maya held his gaze. I strongly recommend we don't. For a moment, neither moved. The street seemed frozen. Then a new sound broke the silence. A phone rang. Not Caleb's, not Brooks. Whitmore's. The captain looked at the screen, and all color disappeared from his face. Because the caller was not from Fairmont. The call was coming from a federal office. The moment Captain Gerald Whitmore saw the caller identification on his phone, his composure cracked, only slightly. Most people would not have noticed. Maya Williams did, so did Sergeant Elena Brooks. The captain stared at the screen for several seconds before answering. The adults gathered along West Chapel Avenue watched quietly. Nobody spoke. Nobody interrupted. The entire street seemed suspended between daylight and darkness. Whitmore stepped several feet away before accepting the call. Whitmore speaking. His voice sounded controlled, professional. Yet Maya noticed the tension in his shoulders. She could not hear the response, but she saw its effect. The captain's expression changed almost immediately. His eyes widened, then narrowed, then widened again. The conversation was not going well. Several times he glanced toward the Aston Martin. Several times he looked toward Maya, and each glance seemed to make him more uncomfortable. Finally, the call ended. Whitmore lowered the phone slowly. Nobody moved. The silence became unbearable. Brooks broke it. Everything all right, Captain? Whitmore forced a smile. Fine. The answer sounded weak. Even Caleb Harlan appeared unconvinced. The captain looked toward Maya. Chief Williams, perhaps we should continue this discussion tomorrow. Maya raised an eyebrow. Tomorrow? Yes. Why? Whitmore hesitated. The pause revealed more than any explanation could have, because something had changed, something important. Maya could feel it. Then Brooks's radio crackled. Dispatch. The message was brief, but it altered the atmosphere instantly. Sergeant Brooks, please confirm your location. West Chapel Avenue, Brooks replied. A pause followed. Then dispatch continued. Additional observers are en route. Brooks frowned. Observers? Federal observers. The street fell completely silent. Whitmore looked away. Caleb closed his eyes. Maya finally understood. The Aston Martin had done exactly what Leon believed it would do. The system had activated, information had traveled, and now people outside Fairmont knew. Whitmore tried to recover. This is being blown out of proportion. Nobody answered. The statement carried no weight anymore. Too many questions existed. Too many witnesses existed. Too much had already been recorded. The captain suddenly turned toward Caleb. What exactly did you tell them? The question came out sharper than intended. Maya noticed, so did Brooks. Caleb looked stunned. I told the truth. Whitmore's jaw tightened. The answer clearly was not the one he wanted. Then Maya spoke. That's the first time today that sentence has sounded dangerous. Several witnesses quietly smiled, not because the situation was funny, because the balance of power was shifting. For years, complaints had disappeared. For years, records had been buried. For years, explanations had replaced accountability. Now accountability was standing in the middle of West Chapel Avenue, and everyone could see it. A cool evening breeze moved through the street. The first lights inside nearby businesses began turning on. Fairmont looked peaceful, almost beautiful, yet beneath that appearance, decades of silence were beginning to crack. Whitmore looked toward Maya. You planned this? The accusation surprised her. Planned what? This entire situation. Maya shook her head. I planned to drive into town. The captain said nothing, because he knew she was right. Everything else had happened because of decisions made by his own department. Brooks closed her notebook. The sound seemed unusually loud. Captain, I have a question. Whitmore looked at her. What is it? Why were you so concerned about the Aston Martin before reviewing any evidence? The question landed perfectly. Direct, simple, difficult. Whitmore opened his mouth, then closed it. No answer came, because every possible answer created another problem. Maya watched carefully. Years of interviews had taught her something important. The most revealing moment often arrived when someone ran out of explanations. Whitmore was approaching that moment. Then headlights appeared at the far end of the avenue. Everyone noticed, a dark SUV. Then another, and another. They moved slowly, purposefully, not local patrol vehicles, not city vehicles, something else. The witnesses turned to look. Brooks looked, Caleb looked, Whitmore looked. The captain's face immediately lost color. He recognized them. Maya recognized his reaction. The approaching vehicles confirmed what the phone call had already suggested. Outside, agencies were arriving. Not tomorrow, not next week, tonight. The SUVs rolled closer. One by one, their headlights reflected across the silver paint of the Aston Martin. Nobody spoke, nobody moved, because everyone understood that whatever happened next would change Fairmont forever. Then the lead SUV stopped. The driver's door opened. A man stepped out wearing a dark suit. He carried a thin folder in one hand. And as he began walking toward Captain Whitmore, Maya noticed something that made her heart race. The folder bore the same federal seal she had seen inside Leon Williams' files. The investigation Leon started years ago had finally arrived in Fairmont, and it was arriving with names. The dark SUVs came to a stop along West Chapel Avenue beneath the fading evening sky. Their engines fell silent one by one. The entire street seemed frozen in anticipation. Witnesses stood motionless outside the diner. The barber remained in his doorway. Sergeant Elena Brooks held her notebook at her side. Officer Caleb Harlan stared at the vehicles with growing panic. Captain Gerald Whitmore looked like a man watching a nightmare become real. The lead SUV's driver stepped forward, carrying a thin federal folder. His suit was plain. His expression was not. Years of investigation and authority seemed to follow him down the sidewalk. When he stopped in front of Whitmore, he did not offer a handshake. He simply opened the folder. Captain Gerald Whitmore? Whitmore swallowed. Yes. The man nodded. Special Agent Daniel Price. The name immediately caught Maya's attention. Price looked briefly toward her, then back at Whitmore. We need to discuss several matters connected to active federal records. Nobody spoke. The evening air suddenly felt colder. Price opened the folder and removed several documents. Over the past several hours, he continued, our office received transmissions connected to historical asset investigations involving this vehicle. Those transmissions contained audio markers, officer identifiers, location records, and assumptions and command communications. Caleb's face turned pale. Whitmore remained silent. The witnesses listened carefully. Price continued. Those transmissions triggered a review of older investigations. That review revealed unresolved questions involving seized assets, evidence handling, complaint dismissals, and financial transactions. Maya felt Leon's presence in that moment, not physically, but through the evidence, through the work, through the truth he refused to abandon. Price looked toward the Aston Martin. The vehicle remembered exactly what it was designed to remember. No one argued, no one laughed, no one denied it. The facts were standing in plain sight. Brooks finally spoke. Agent Price, are these matters connected to previous Fairmont investigations? Yes. The answer arrived immediately, directly, without hesitation. Price turned several pages. Many years ago, Leon Williams provided information that suggested certain financial activities continued after official investigations ended. At the time, some evidence remained incomplete. Maya lowered her eyes briefly. The mention of Leon brought both pain and pride. He had spent years being ignored, years being doubted, years being dismissed. Yet here stood the proof that he had been right. Price continued. Today's events reopened those questions. Whitmore finally found his voice. This is outrageous. The statement sounded weak. Even he seemed aware of it. Price calmly looked at him. Captain, today's body camera footage, witness accounts, radio communications, evidence handling decisions, and command instructions are all being preserved. The witnesses exchanged quiet looks. For the first time in years, people believed someone was actually listening. Not hearing, listening. Price turned toward Maya. Chief Williams. She nodded. Agent Price, your husband left an extraordinary record. Maya felt emotion tighten her throat. She had spent years carrying grief, but grief was different from regret. Leon had lived with purpose, and now his work was finally speaking for itself. Price looked toward the gathered residents. Many people in this community filed complaints that were never fully examined. That will change. Several witnesses lowered their heads. An older woman wiped tears from her eyes. The barber folded his arms and stared at the pavement. Years of frustration seemed to surface all at once. Maya understood the feeling, because accountability was not revenge. Accountability was recognition. Recognition that harm occurred. Recognition that people mattered. Recognition that truth deserved daylight. Brooks stepped beside Maya. Neither woman spoke. They did not need to. The record was speaking loudly enough. Price closed the folder. This investigation will continue. The statement carried enormous weight, not because it promised punishment, because it promised honesty. And honesty had been missing from Fairmont for far too long. Whitmore looked defeated. Caleb looked lost. The witnesses looked relieved. And Maya looked toward the darkening sky above the town she had come to serve. Fairmont still had problems. The investigation was only beginning. Many questions remained unanswered. Many records remained unopened. Many people still deserved justice. But something important had happened. The silence had finally broken. Leon Williams used to believe that truth moved slowly because it carried weight. Maya understood that better now than ever before. Truth had arrived exactly as he predicted. Not with noise, not with anger, not with revenge, but with evidence, with patience, with facts. As the last sunlight disappeared beyond the horizon, Maya touched the watch Leon once wore. The second hand continued moving steadily forward, just as he always had, just as the truth always would. The witnesses slowly began heading home. The diner lights glowed warmly. The barber closed his shop. The street relaxed for the first time all day, and standing beside the Aston Martin, Maya Williams allowed herself one quiet smile. Not because the fight was over, but because fairness finally had a chance to begin. The truth had survived, the record had survived, and Fairmont would never be the same again. Subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, your viewing location, and share this video.